How you doing today? So I'm gonna wait for a few more people to come in because I want to talk about something, kind of help y'all out a little bit. Um, so we'll wait for a few more people to jump in here, and then I'm gonna break down a couple of things, kind of, just give a little tip, a few little tips, a few little guidance, things like that. Um, Something came to my table today. And I thought that it would be interesting, to kind of go through it a little bit and kind of share the process of what I did to kind of, check into the situation, make sure that, what was being stated is actually kind of what it is, right? So, hey, everybody coming in, how y'all doing today? I actually wasn't planning on going live today, funny enough, but something came to the table, so I thought that I would, as I checked into it, I thought it might be a good idea to kind of go through and share with you a bit of the process that I went through to go ahead and get to the bottom of a situation, right? Hey, how you doing? Okay, so let's get started, right? So, first of all, I want to say that I love the fact that, the information that I'm putting out, the things that I'm sharing, people are actually, taking that information and actually turning around and applying it real time, and trying to do their own due diligence, right? And trying to check the veracity of things or the accuracy of things as it relates to present statements being made by the Tulsa Real Estate Fund, as well as historical statements being made by the Tulsa Real Estate Fund and or Jay Morrison, right? So I love that, right? Because that was the whole purpose of this, right? Was to kind of teach people, the importance of checking and verifying everything. It's cool to trust, but you as I always say, trust but verify, right? So I'm gonna give you a modicum of trust, a little bit of trust, but I want to verify everything you're saying. So with that in mind, a thing came to me today regarding an alleged property purchase made by the Tulsa Real Estate Fund and or in conjunction with Jay Morrison in Macon, Georgia. And the person that brought this to me had done some due diligence, and it appeared to them that maybe the Tulsa Real Estate Fund was lying, and that they had not, or Jay Morrison was lying and had not actually purchased this property for the benefit of the Tulsa Real Estate Fund, and potentially may not have purchased it at all. So, first of all, I commend that person for actually taking the time to do some due diligence and checking into the situation. In going through that, I shared with that person, how you would go about looking into this properly to make sure that your assessments of the situation or your hypothesis of the situation is accurate, right? So, okay. So essentially, in order to understand doing real estate due diligence, you kind of have to understand kind of how investment property structures work, right? So, part of doing due diligence is understanding, and this is why when you invest, you have to have a common knowledge of what it is that you're investing in. You kind of have to understand the nuances and intricacies of how structures work as far as that type of investment is related, et cetera, because if you don't understand those things, it's very difficult to do accurate due diligence on a situation and to figure out what's real and what's lies, right? So, these tips and advice that I'm going to provide in this video is for two things. One, it's to better help you understand how to do due diligence on a real estate type of investment scenario, number one. And number two, some of you guys, I'm sure, are interested in getting into investing in investment type real estate where there are tenants and rent rolls and things like that, and generating some income from those types of investments. So as you go through this journey, right, the way you structure your portfolio of assets is very, very important. So let's go over a couple of things, right? So number one, right, let's give a little understanding and background. So first of all, let's deal with appraisal, valuation, and when it comes to investment property, right? Specifically multifamily residential investment property and commercial investment property. Now, here's the thing. So when you are considering these types of valuations, you have to understand that there are three types of appraisals, right? There's appraisals done based on comparative market approach. And what a comparative market approach is basically, or comparative market analysis, as some real estate agents would call it. What that is basically you're taking the subject property or the property that is being considered for purchase by an individual or company, and you're comparing it to similar properties within a 5-mile radius. You're looking at sales history over the last 30, 60, maybe 90 days. Sometimes they go back as far as a year. And you're getting a valuation based on that analysis. Sometimes the appraisal will actually go out to the house itself, right? Because this is usually done with single-family residential homes. They'll usually go out to the house themselves. They'll look at the house. They'll look at the types of upgrades in the house. They'll look at, certain things in comparison in relation to other properties that are similar. And then they'll give their best estimate of value. Now, you can hire 5 different appraisers, licensed appraisers, and you might get 5 different valuation numbers. So, while these are licensed professionals, licensed appraisers, at the end of the day, there's always a little bit of opinion when it comes to issuing an appraisal valuation. And so what you get from one appraiser, you may not get from another appraiser, and that's common. So, that's that. So that's the comparative market analysis. Now, when you're dealing with multifamily residential and commercial property, a comparative market analysis doesn't work. It doesn't have much value in the appraisal process. And the reason why that is because a comparative market analysis cannot take into account occupancy rates and rent rolls, right? So when you have a multifamily residential development, or you have a commercial development, right, or a commercial piece of property or multifamily residential piece of property, what you have to also consider is the value of the rent roll, right? What is fair market rental value? What are people paying for rent? In relation to the number of units, or, commonly used in real estate investment lingo, the number of doors, how many of those doors actually have warm bodies in there that are actually paying rent, right? So that type of appraisal, when you look at appraising from that standpoint, it's called an income approach, right? So the income approach to appraising is a lot more technical, and it's a lot more detailed. There are a lot more considerations, right? And so with that in mind, of course, right, that is a specific type of appraiser that has to physically go out and physically run analysis and physically look at things to attach the appropriate valuation to the property. The third type of appraisal is what we call the cost approach, right? The cost approach is generally used when you're doing a construction project, right? And so, now you're looking at what is it being potentially bought for? What are the amounts of renovations and improvements that are going to have to happen to be able to get this? And not just renovations and improvements, but, if you bought a piece of raw land and you're going to develop it, right? So what is the cost associated with that, right? And then based on that cost, what are the projected potential rent rolls? What's the maximum occupancy that can happen? Based on the area, what is the average occupancy rate, et cetera, et cetera. And then you derive a valuation based on those factors, right? So, when you are looking at an investment piece of property, going online and Googling the property address and looking at what Zillow says or Real Property says or Street Easy says really isn't a good, it's really not a good indication of valuation, because those are what we call automated valuation modules, right? And those automation valuation modules are based on a comparative market approach. And because of that, right, there are a number of factors that have not been considered that will definitely affect the valuation of the building, right? So with that in mind, right, let's understand appraisal and how appraising works to first of all derive an underlying valuation to the asset. Now, beyond that, you have to understand how real estate practices standpoint is purchased, right? How it is held, right? Why is it done that way? Okay, so you have to look at it like this. Let's look at it like this, right? So one of the things you have to consider when you buy investment property is, of course, the cash flows, right? So the underlying cash flow of the asset. If it's a multifamily residential development, okay, so if it's got 100 units to it, well, how many of those units have people in there? Okay, great. So if 90 of the units have people in there, then that's a 90% occupancy rate, and that's pretty good, right? So, pretty happy about that. What's the capitalization rate, right? So what is the amount of time it's going to take for you to recoup your initial investment in the property based on rent rolls, right? So, that's your cap rate. And so, capitalization rate becomes very important as well. But if you decide that you've done your analysis, you've done your due diligence, you've done your all your homework, and you decide this is a good investment for you for your real estate portfolio based on your investment policy, right? Then in that aspect, now you have to consider how you're going to buy it. So on one side, you're looking at revenue, but on the other side, now you have to consider liability, right? So let's say that you have a limited liability company, and your limited liability company decides that it's going to buy this property, right? Great. You buy this property, you're happy with this property, you rent it out, it's cash flowing, you're happy. But then you find another piece of property and you decide, hey, you know what? I want to buy this one too. So you buy that property under the same LLC, right? And this is now I'm giving you what happens here now, right? So now you decide to do that. Eventually you amass 10 pieces of property under one LLC. Okay, now let's say that there's an electrical issue in one of your investment properties, and because of that electrical issue, right, that is your responsibility to fix. The investment property catches on fire, burns down, and someone dies, right? Okay, you're liable at that point. You're going to be sued, right? And when you get sued, chances are you're going to lose. Now, what happens is when you lose, right, the judgment, which will include punitive damages, monetary damages, number of different things, is going to go against your LLC. Well, guess what? For one property loss, right, one property lawsuit, now every other property owned by that LLC is now at risk, right? Because now, in order for that LLC to pay, it may have to liquidate all of the properties. And so what happens is an entire investment portfolio can be destroyed based on one lawsuit. And that generally, that's a big problem. So how do you avoid that, right? So generally what happens is, what a seasoned investment property buyer will do is they'll structure it differently. They'll have an LLC, right, that's set up for the purpose of their real estate business, right? And that LLC will be at the top of the structure. Now, for every property that they buy, right, they're going to set up a separate LLC, and that specific investment property will be owned by that specific LLC. So let's say you have ABC Real Estate Company LLC, right? That is your what we'll call parent company, right? That is the company that is going to own all of these different investments, right? But then you decide to buy an investment property that, let's say it's called 123 Main Street, right? So then what you would do is set up an LLC called 123 Main Street LLC, and that property would be owned by 123 Main Street LLC. However, ABC Real Estate Investment Company would own 123 Main Street LLC. And you would do this for each one of your investment properties, right? This same structure, this same strategy, right? And by doing it that way, what ends up happening is if there is an electrical fire at 123 Main Street, well, that the only property owned by 123 Main Street LLC is 123 Main Street. So in the event that 123 Main Street LLC gets sued and you lose, you can simply file bankruptcy on 123 Main Street LLC. And now, right, you have saved the other 9 properties that you have. But now you've limited your liability. You've limited your exposure. You've limited your risk. So that is how you would structure this type of situation to ensure, right, that you are limiting your liability from potential lawsuits. See, remember, I told you the goal of investing is to maximize capital appreciation while mitigating its risk to its lowest common denominator, making as much money as you can while taking the least amount of risk possible. That's not just about due diligence, that's also about shifting risk and liability away from your overall portfolio by diversifying the way you structure your business to ensure that you are siloing and insulating your risk in the event that you end up facing a lawsuit. So that is how that works, right? So now that we have an understanding of the structure, right, of how real estate investing is done, now let's look into what I did today. Okay. So someone brought to me a property with the address of, give me a second, it is 2360 Treadway Properties, right? 2360 Treadway. And it's in Macon, Georgia, and it was alleged that the Tulsa Real Estate Fund had purchased this property. And the person that brought it to me had sent me a screenshot and said that it was owned by company 2360 Treadway Properties, LLC, right? And that, you know, that wasn't the Tulsa Real Estate Fund, so they had suspicion that this may not be owned by the Tulsa Real Estate Fund and that Jay Morrison was potentially lying. And apparently this property was bought in 2019. So, of course, right, I looked at it. Now, what they had done was a Google search on the property. They had found the name of the owner, etc., and they had suspicions. Okay. First of all, I love the fact that people are doing due diligence. I love the fact that people are starting to learn. But in order to be good at due diligence, you must first understand the basic things that I just explained previous. And, you know, due diligence is transactional based, right? So the more transactions you do, the more due diligence you learn, the better you get at it. Does that make sense? So here's what I did, right? So the first thing I did was I went into Bibb County's property assessor, right? I went online to the property assessor's records, right? And I pulled the records from the property assessor. And the reason why I do that first, right, when I'm looking at a piece of property is because any ownership, in order to establish an ownership in real property or real estate, I don't care what it is, be it investment, be it single family homes, multifamily homes, commercial, industrial, it doesn't matter. Your ownership will be recorded in the county assessor's office. And in 2020, most county assessor's office have an online tool that allow you to search the address or search the purported owner's name and pull the assessor records, which will tell you who the owner is, what the owner's address is. It will give you the plat map, parcel number. It will give you specific details. It'll give you the tax assessor's valuation, tax assessor's records if you dig far enough. There's a lot of information you can get, who sold the property to that person, all the transaction records that the county assessor has. It's generally right online at the property assessor. So you just go to the county property assessor and you pull the records, right? So when I pulled the records, I too saw that this property in Macon, Georgia was owned by 2360 Treadway Properties, right? Now, of course, I need to understand who is 2360 Treadway Properties LLC, right? And oftentimes, you're able to find that out if you can figure out what state of incorporation that the limited liability company was established in, or incorporated in, or organized in. Whatever word you want to use, it's the same, right? So, what I did was, knowing that this property is in Georgia, the next logical place for me to look, right, is the business entity search database in the state of Georgia, right? So I went to the business entity database in the state of Georgia, and I ran the name in the database search, and because Georgia is a state that just provides records for nothing, I was able to pull the records for this property. And once I pulled the records for this property, right, or the records for the company that owns the property, as you can see, this is a PDF document that I was able to pull right from the Georgia Secretary of State. It is the Articles of Organization, right? It says 2360 Treadway Properties is the business name, right? It gives the registered agent, Walter Dees. It gives the address. It gives the organizers. And there's a name there, E.J. Hawkins, organizer. The address for the organizer, the authorized signature, which was E.J. Hawkins, right? So once I saw that, I did a simple Google search, right? I ran E.J. Hawkins, and then I also ran that in conjunction with Tulsa Real Estate Fund, right? So once I did that, I realized that the Tulsa Real Estate Fund had done, and I'll show it to you, they had done a Form S1A, Tulsa Real Estate Fund LLC. And as I began to search through the document, right, and let me find it here, give me a second. Let's see, because they do talk about it in here. Let's see. Notes receivable. Let me back up. Let's back up. You see here, investment in Treadway Properties. On June 3rd, 2019, our wholly owned subsidiary, JMREP 28 LLC, or JMREP, entered into an amended and restated operating agreement with Alchemy Real Estate Investment Group, or Alchemy, related to the formation and management of 2360 Treadway Properties LLC, or Treadway, a company organized to engage in a single-held asset for a 98-unit apartment community in Macon, Georgia, known as the Oaks North. So at that point, I have been able to establish, right, the ownership of the Tulsa Real Estate Fund of this property that was purported to be bought by Jay Morrison. So, in one of the rare occurrences, he's actually not lying. They actually do own the property, right? But I had to do sufficient due diligence first, right, to be able to establish the veracity of the claim, right? So I went through a step-by-step process, understanding what I know, right, about how real estate property holdings are structured from a company or incorporation standpoint, right? Understanding what I understand about how that would work out, it was very easy for me to then back into the situation, right, and find out if the ownership was transparent and determine ownership properly. So, absolutely, Jay is still in trouble. But, you know, this is one of the rare occurrences where he was actually telling the truth. Now, so I just wanted to come on and give a little bit of, just a few little tips, a little bit of guidance here, you know, on doing due diligence on real estate investment proposals, and looking into ownership records, and going through the process of figuring out the ownership structure, and if the people purported to own a property actually really do own the property. So I hope this was helpful for everyone. I am going to save this video actually, so it will appear in my on my Instagram, and I'm probably going to load it to YouTube as well. I hope everybody enjoyed this short and brief tutorial, and everybody have a great day. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.